Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to the world's greatest Bronze Age comic book podcast, Flea Market Fantasy. I'm your co-host, Mike L., and as always, I'm joined by
Michael Dell of the LCS Hockey Radio Show.
That's right, and it's Shock-Tober, and I don't want to scare anyone too much, but we've got the same guest 2 weeks in a row.
That's right.
Somebody's joining us.
Miles Watson.
Woo!
They're
Author.
not scared. They're disgusted. They're just ready for suicide at this point.
Yeah, of course, Miles is an author and raconteur, and he's a big horror fan, so that's why I bring him on for Shock-Tober. Yeah, that's right. 2 weeks in a row, you're described as a raconteur. But you love your horror movies, and you love your horror, so I'm like, we'll get Miles on for Shock-Tober. And last week, we did The Spectre, and not really much horror in there. This week, there's a little bit of horror here. A little bit, I think.
Definitely,
Yep.
And the book we're doing today
violent episode.
is Dead of Night, issue 11 from 1975. And this is from Marvel Comics, because I'm guessing Dead of Night is not a very popular title if you just hear it. But yeah, it's from Marvel. And the reason I picked this one is because it features a character called the Scarecrow.
Right.
The Scarecrow. Because, Mike L., when we hear Scarecrow, we usually think of the Batman villain, right?
Yes. And it's funny because I did know that there was a Marvel Scarecrow, but apparently this is not the Marvel Scarecrow I was
That's
thinking.
right.
Yeah.
Because when I picked this book, I thought this was that Marvel Scarecrow. This is a different Marvel Scarecrow.
Right.
But first of all, Mike, I forgot to look it up. Maybe you can Google it. But do you know when the DC Scarecrow first premiered?
Oh, it was World's Finest Comics number 3, I think. Or was it number 1?
What year based? Like
40. Really?
Okay, so that Scarecrow is around a way long time ago. All right.
Yeah.
Now, Miles, you're familiar with that Scarecrow, right? The Batman one?
Oh, yeah, Batman's opponent, the Scarecrow, yes, who they even brought into some of the films.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah, he was in those films.
Played by the Irish guy who does Peaky Blinders now.
Cillian Murphy?
Yeah,
that sounds right.
I think that's how you say it. Yeah.
All right, so the Scarecrow this is not about was Ebenezer Lawton, and he was created by Stan Lee and Don Heck, and he's just like a villain. I think he fought Iron Man and stuff back in the day. And his first appearance was in Tales of Suspense 51, 1963.
Mm-hmm.
But that is not this Scarecrow. That is not this guy.
Okay.
This Scarecrow was created by Scott Edelman and Rika Rival, and that's the creative team behind this issue we're reading here today. And I don't know if I want to get into his precise history yet. I think I'd like to discuss the issue because I will say this. I was confused a bit when I was reading this issue.
I was going to say, yes.
And I want to see if you guys can pick up on what his true origin is when we go through the book. So we'll talk about that later. But yes, Scott Edelman and Rika Rival are the creative team here. And maybe we'll get into more of that, his backstory later, his character. Might want to jump right into it. But Dead of Night 11, this was a horror anthology that Marvel produced from 1973 to 1975. It was mostly reprints of older stuff, like from the 50s and 60s. But there were occasional new stories, and this is one of those new stories. And and this series ended with issue 11.
Yeah, this is it.
Now, I don't know if you read the little introduction at the beginning of this issue. There's like a letters page or a comment from Scott Edelman. He wrote like an introduction, and he was talking about how he conceived this character. I guess horror was all the rage in the early 70s, Miles. You'd have been right at home with all the horror. And the editor, Len Wein, said, hey, why don't you come up with a new horror idea? So Scott Edelman thought, there's never been a Scarecrow. I'll come up with a Scarecrow guy. And then by the time he came around to actually, produce stuff with the character, horror kind of wasn't that popular anymore. In the mid-70s, it kind of imploded. Because this character was first supposed to appear in, he's supposed to appear in 2 different books, Monsters Unleashed, and then that series got canceled. So then he was going to appear in Giant Size Werewolf. That got canceled. So then Dead of Night said, hey, come on over. You can run in Dead of Night here. So you'll get an ongoing feature here in Dead of Night, starting with issue 11. So that's what we're reading today. And then that series got canceled. So
right.
his character was kind of fated for doom. And after this, he appeared in Marvel Spotlight 26 in 1976. And then he appeared in Marvel 2-in-1 in 1976, Marvel 2-in-1 issue 18 in 1976. And then he wouldn't see print again until Doctor Strange, Sorcerer Supreme, issue 31 in 1991. So 15-year gap between appearances for Scarecrow. And at that point, they changed his name to the Straw Man.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Because they didn't want the confusion with the Stan Lee Scarecrow anymore.
Right.
So they called him Straw Man. But, yeah, so that's this guy. All right, Miles, any thoughts about the Scarecrows in general?
As we had previously discussed on, I believe it was last week, as a matter of fact.
Oh, that movie.
Yeah, I have always found Scarecrows a little bit creepy, and I will again reference, there's an excellent episode of Friday the 13th, the series, shot in Mike L's homeland, ... Canada, that concerns a Scarecrow carrying a scythe who kills people upon command of an evil master. And I feel like Scarecrows are creepy. I mean, like, if you ever, I live in a town, but I drive a lot through cornfields, and I mean cornfields, children of the cornfield. And if you've ever seen a Scarecrow up on that cross or whatever at sunset in a cornfield, it is more than a little creepy, especially if there's a couple of crows sitting on top of it. Yeah. I feel like Scarecrows are inherently a little creepy. They're kind of a variation on the whole fear that people have of dolls, or what do they call those? I guess puppets. You know, the puppets that ventriloquist dummies.
Yeah.
Or creepy dolls. There's a whole kind of genre. I wouldn't even call it a subgenre. It's a genre of its own of possessed, personified objects. Yeah, Chucky is a good example. Human-looking things. They're not humans, but they're shaped like humans, and they're creepy. They're possessed by the devil or a demon or what have you, some evil spirit. And I think there's a strong argument to be made that that's its own genre of horror. And I personally think it's a pretty creepy one.
A couple other quick Scarecrow things before we get at the issue. Michael, the guy who really wanted to draw the Scarecrow, John Byrne, he was a big fan.
Really?
Yeah, and I guess he did a concept art for it before this issue, and his version of the Scarecrow had a pumpkin head.
Really?
And then when he saw Rika Rival stuff, he said, "Oh yeah, that's much better." So he liked Rika Rival stuff better. But yeah, John Byrne wanted to draw it. And then the other thing, I heard a good Scarecrow joke the other day. You ready?
What is it?
Why did the Scarecrow get promoted at work?
Why?
Because he was outstanding in his field.
There
you go.
Wow.
All right.
That's painful.
So here we go. Dead of Night, issue 11. Let's look at the cover, Michael.
Ooh, yeah. Okay, just going to click back here. I was on page 3 looking at that sketch. Anyway, Dead of Night, Marvel Comics Group. And also, I should say, I like to fancy myself as an expert on like all Marvel titles. I had never heard of this title before this week. Yeah, so 25 cents, 11, Dead of Night featuring the Scarecrow. We've got this really cool logo, the Scarecrow. It's all in like jagged kind of letters with the written in red inside the yellow S. And then we have the classic, not speech, or not corner box, but corner circle with the Scarecrow's face in it. It looks pretty awesome. And then, it says all new Marveldom's #1 Shock Star, not
right,
Rock Star. I love it. A fearsome.
That didn't escape my notice.
Yeah. A fearsome night prowler versus a centuries-old cult of blood. Fires of rebirth, fires of death. And then we have this incredible cover by Gil Kane, right?
Yep, and inked by Bernie Wrightson.
Nice. And basically Scarecrow is...
I met him, by the way.
You met Bernie Wrightson?
I absolutely met Bernie Wrightson.
Why? Under what circumstances?
Bernie, I don't mean to interrupt, but your narrative, but Bernie, when I was working at Optic Nerve Studios in LA, Bernie Wrightson was hired. We were trying to get, they made an ill-advised prequel to John Carpenter's The Thing.
Okay.
Back in, I want to say this was 2009, so it probably came out in like 2010, 2011. We were gunning for that. Optic Nerve is an effects studio. It was an effects studio before it was out of business. But we were gunning to get The Thing, and Bernie Wrightson was hired to do concept art for the monster. If you're familiar with John Carpenter's The Thing, you know, it had different forms. It could change, shift bodies. If you're not familiar with John Carpenter's The Thing, you need to watch that immediately because it's one of the best horror movies of all time.
Stop listening to this show. Yep.
No.
Yeah. But at any rate, the Bernie Wrightson came in. He was still in the business at that time. He wasn't in the best of health. He did pass away some years later, but he came in and did the concept art for our proposal for The Thing. And he was a nice guy. He was a really nice guy. And of course, a legend, you know, like if you read The Stand, he did the illustrated artwork for The Stand. He did the illustrated artwork for Cycle of the Werewolf, both by Stephen King. And I mean, I'm talking independent of his comic work. He did a lot of concept art for movies and other, you know, television shows and stuff. So he was a nice guy. He was a really nice guy in a field that's, you know, not a lot of nice guys, but just stepping in with that story. Good dude, and obviously enormously talented and old school.
Yeah.
You know, went with the pen, went with the charcoal, went with that approach. He wasn't into the whole digital all that shit that they do nowadays where they build 3D images on those. He didn't do that kind of stuff. He went straight to the paper, and that's how he rolled. So
yeah,
that's my Bernie Wrightson story.
That's a good one though. And this cover here is spectacular too.
Yes.
Just everything about this, Michael, this cover. It's amazing.
I love it. Yeah.
Yeah. Finish describing it.
Well, basically, so Scarecrow is holding up this dude by his like neck, and there's a girl kind of in the background, like, you know, kind of like holding herself up like she's injured or something. And there's these what are those, like, not hay, but what is that in the background there?
Yeah, it's kind of like hay.
Yeah, like barrels of hay, and everything's on fire. But the design of this cover is so freaking good. It's like almost like a big X, like the layout of, if you look at the Scarecrow's head to where his leg goes, it's crossed with the guy's leg, and then like the way the guy's head is, and then the way the Scarecrow's scarf flies out. It kind of forms this gigantic X on the cover. It's just amazing.
You got a big full moon behind his head. The
gigantic moon, and
highlight him.
Fire is like, you know, reaching up into the sky, and then the girl's down, and it's just great. I love it.
Yeah, and the Scarecrow is like a classic Scarecrow, like raggedy clothes, green coat, big brown floppy hat.
Yeah,
like a sack face, red scarf,
red eyes. Yep.
Yeah. But Miles, what do you think of this cover? It's beautiful. No?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. This is the type of. I'm scrolling back because I'm on the first page where he's grinning at his soon-to-be victims.
Yeah.
But I'm like I said, I'm a big fan of the idea of the Scarecrow for its kind of scruffy minimalism, I guess you would say, as what a Scarecrow is. And this cover has a lot of, it's got the big blue, sort of dark blue sky.
Mm.
And then the guy in the robes is white, so there's a nice contrast, and they've got the yellow and the red. So there's a nice use of color here. He's got the moon behind him. He's grinning. I like the use of Mike Dell in the previous broadcast. He talked about the use of the heavy blacks in ink, and I really like the use of the heavy blacks here for the Scarecrow's shadows under his left arm as he's grabbing that poor cultist who he's about to send to his maker. The heavy blacks, I really like the execution of this cover. I think it's spare, it's minimalist, but it's also very detailed. You see the folds in the shirt. You see that he's got his pants, the boots, or I don't even know his shoes, feet. How do you describe that? What is
They're
that?
like-
The
It's
wrapping.
like straw wrapped in bandages, I think.
Yeah. Like, I think he's made of straw, isn't he?
Yeah.
But
So, but I dig all the folds in the cultist's robe and everything. Oh, it's so good. All right, so yeah, great cover. Gil Kane, Bernie Wrightson. All right, so then we get into the book, and at the beginning we get the little intro by Scott Edelman talking about how he created Scarecrow, and we get a little sketch by John Romita Sr. doing some character sketches.
oh, nice. I didn't notice that. Very
But,
cool.
So then we get to the big story, Mike.
Yes.
Big splash.
Stanley presents the Sinister Scarecrow. And we see the Scarecrow's face like superimposed over the moon looking down. And right away we are into weird territory here. We've got these men walking along with goat heads. Wearing
purple
like
robes. Purple robes and goat heads. Yeah.
Right. And it's like, it's really cool narration. On a night such as this, most city dwellers hide in the shelter of their homes, afraid to respond to the slightest outside sound, afraid to get involved, afraid of themselves. Yet there are those who do not flee from evil, but rush towards it like moths to a candle flame. The Scarecrow waits for them. And right away, we'll talk about this later. This art is awesome.
Yes, it is.
We cut to the next page, and we get this very cool shot of like a darkened room with a window, and the light coming through the window is creating like, what do you even call that? It's the opposite of a shadow, when light is just creating like a shape on the ground. I don't even know. I should know this, but
good question. Yeah.
Yeah, no one knows. But anyway, so like you see this, it's like 3 panels in a row. The window is like closed, then it's being opened by the guy, and then he's in, and then he lets.
But also the camera gets closer to the guy each panel as well.
Yes,
So
true.
You get a sense of movement through the panels.
Yeah. So this guy comes in, and he's there looking at this this artwork. It's like all this artwork on display, and he's like, the painting's in here somewhere. All we have to do is find it. So start looking. And then the narrations. He was a queer duck, some would say. He made certain provisions which many have told him were quite inadequate. And so he gets confronted by this security guard. And the security guard is reaching for his gun, but then this guy pulls out his gun and shoots him. Chapow, chapow, chapow. And that guy's dead. And now there's a second goat man inside the art gallery with him. And so they're looking, and then he's like, yes, as soon as that Scarecrow painting is in our hands, the cult of Kalamay will rule the world once more. And so they're looking, using their flashlights. But then, something happens. We see a hand coming up from behind the goat man's face or head. And it's kind of weird because it switches angles, but it grabs him. And then all of a sudden his mask falls off. Right?
Yep.
And then he turns around, and sure enough, it's the Scarecrow who's scaring the crap out of him. And the guy...
He's choking him out.
Yeah, he's choking him out, and then that guy's knocked out, and then the other guy's like, what? So then he pulls a gun and shoots at him, and then the guy's like, so it's Halloween time, eh, Joker? Guess I'll just have to remove your mask the hard way. But the bullets pass through this guy because he's made of straw. So then the Scarecrow leaps towards the guy and grabs him, and starts choking him too. Oh, cracks his neck. This is definitely a horror comic, right?
Yeah, Miles, in the first couple pages, we had 2 deaths, and he put out like a neck crank on him. Just snapped his neck from behind.
I have to admit, I was kind of shocked by the killing. I wasn't expecting killing. I, as an avid comic book reader of 60s, 70s, and 80s, and even 90s comics, growing up, one thing that kind of shocked me was the Punisher killed a lot of people. Other than the Punisher, you didn't see a great deal of killing in comic books, other than maybe Conan. I mean, there were exceptions. There were exceptions.
Conan was the first, I think, technically. Yeah.
And there were cases like in the Avengers where Egghead got killed by, what was it, Hank Pym?
Egghead.
There were killings that were unintentional that happened, and they were big on consequence. You killed somebody, now it's a big disgrace and all this kind of thing. Like, you're a murderer and you have a huge arc. He just wastes these guys.
Yeah.
I was kind of shocked by that. I was not expecting. I thought he was just. I thought this character was just going to be the standard vigilante kind of, have a backstory. Your grandpa ruined my cornfield, so now I'm going to get even on your grandpa with my Scarecrow powers. I didn't know what I was expecting from this story, but I wasn't expecting him to kill two people by breaking their necks in the first couple pages.
Last week when we were talking that I picked this issue, I said you gave the big intro about the horror movie you liked, and I said, well, I hate to break it to you, but I think this is just a guy who dresses like a scarecrow. Because when I was flipping through it, that's what it looked like. But technically, that's not what we're dealing with here, and we'll get to that later. But I didn't expect to see 2 deaths by page 6 or whatever this is. So yeah, it's quite a way to start. We're actually officially in a horror comic book, Michael.
Yeah, that's right. Appropriate for Shock-Tober.
And the next page, we get a huge splash page. Enter the Scarecrow. Yes. And he's standing over his murdered victims, one in each hand, and he's laughing it up. And there's fire all around them.
Mm-hmm. It's great.
Yeah.
And so we see the title and the credits here: Scott Edelman, Rico Rival, Glynis Wine, Marcus, and Len Wine.
Yeah, just a Marcus. I forget that guy's last name, but they just credited him as Marcus as the letterer.
Yeah, like Madonna or Prince or Hammer, right?
Yeah, I don't know why they just gave him one name.
So then we cut over to a scene. What's it called? An auction.
Yes, an art auction.
Yes. So this guy is auctioning off the painting of the Scarecrow. Yes. And someone in the audience is like, 5,100. And the guy's like, sorry, my friends, I got your hopes up too high. But this is more to me than just a children's game. So so it gets a little confusing, at least for me. So then we cut over to this other guy, and he's like, right again, Jess, can't you ever be wrong? Oh, wait, that's because in the previous panel, that guy had said, congratulations, Dave. The minute you get too optimistic is when everything begins to fall up. And that's when he got cut off by the other guy. So then that guy's like, right again, Jess, can't you be wrong? And then that guy is like 5,500. And then the skinny guy is like, I thought that I was the only one afflicted with the desire for this painting. Such a pity that you're going to lose 6,000. So then, all of a sudden, the friend of the pessimistic guy with the beard, huh?
Yeah, the guy with the beard, he's technically like the main guy here. His name is Jess. And then his buddy, I think that's his little brother, actually, Dave.
Okay, yeah. It says,
even though they give him 2 different last names in this book, though, but that's supposed to be his little brother, Dave.
Okay.
And then there's a blonde there with him. I forget her name, but she's like Jess's girlfriend.
Right.
And they're trying to bid it on the painting, but then we got this skinny, creepy guy who's all rich, and he's trying to get the painting. So then Dave goes over and just elbows the skinny guy in the belly. Just says, like this.
Yeah. So the brother comes over, He elbows him, knocks him over. And then the guy's like, oh, I'm terribly sorry. Here, let me help you up. And then what is it called? The auctioneer? Is that what his name is?
Yes.
He's like, he's like, going once, going twice, sold for $6,100. And so the guy with the beard won the auction.
Yeah, Jess.
Yeah. And then the girl, no, the brother, the main guy says, I don't understand, Dave. Why did that man give up? He seems so determined. And then Dave says, we've both seen others like him, Jess. He's the guy who bluffs at poker with an empty wallet. So then that skinny guy comes back, and now he's all pissed off. And they're like, yeah, whatever. And he's like, I promise we shall meet again. So then those guys take off. So now we got Dave, the brother, and the girl, right? Is it Dave? Yeah.
Dave, Jess, and the girl.
Yeah. So they're all chatting it up. I don't even remember what they were talking about here.
Well, they're just talking about their childhood and him leaving home and all that kind of stuff. Miles, now, first, Miles, have you ever been to an art auction? You seem like, as a raconteur, you've probably been to art auctions.
Stop calling me a raconteur. Damn it.
Have you ever won an auction?
I have never been to an auction. I feel a little bit inadequate now because you've mentioned this, and I've never been to an auction. Well, mainly because I don't have any money. So what the fuck could I bid?
Yes.
But no, I've never been to an auction. But I'm fairly certain if you elbowed somebody in the guts while they were making a bid, there would be some consequences to that. I don't think you could just be like, hey, we got the bid, thanks to my elbow to your sternum.
Right.
Yeah, I think that breaks a rule or something. But Miles, from a writing perspective, when they're having their discussions between Dave and Jess, did you notice how many times they call each other by their first name? Every panel.
And I hate that. I remember back in the day, I reviewed a book where it wasn't a bad book, but the author had this obsessive tendency, which I can't believe got past his editor. The characters' names were Mike and Joe. And the dialogue went like this. Hey, Mike, do you think we should interview the suspect? Joe, I'm not really sure. But Mike, don't you think we should interview the suspect? Joe, I just don't know. I'm not sure. But Mike, I think it would be a good... Joe, I told you I don't know. And I was like, if you write Mike or Joe one more fucking time...
And that's exactly my reaction to Dave and Jess in this story. It was just constant. Dave? Oh, sure, Jess. What do you think, Dave? I don't know, Jess. Not so good. But, you just got to hang in there. And then Michael, when they're having a little discussion, calling each other by their names every back and forth for 30 minutes, and then a bunch of dudes and goat heads broke into the apartment. They kicked down the doors. They got and these guys, there's only one guy in a robe. And the other guys are just in like loincloths.
Right.
You don't want to see that. You don't want to see a bunch of dudes and goat heads and loincloths break into your apartment.
No, you don't. So these guys. So then, the girl looks over and is like, Jess, and he's like, soon our Lord shall walk the earth once more. Take the painting, and they're trying to fight back. No, you can't do this. So then they sock him. Actually says sock.
Yep.
I've never seen that uses the sound effect. Sock. So then they start fighting back. The girl throws a lamp, like a lamp at him, at one of the guys, and hits him. And then the brother punches another one of the goat guys. But then a goat guy smashes his head against the ground. And then they surround the girl, they grab her, and then they take the painting, right?
And the girl.
And
her name's Harmony, by the way.
Harmony.
All right. Now here's the part where I get confused. Right? Because after they go away with the painting and the girl, then we see a shot of like the sun coming in through the sunroof of this apartment, or the skylight or whatever. And then it's light coming in on the two guys who are passed out on the ground. And it says one of them gets up and shambles awkwardly across the room and exits. So I'm like, oh, well, here we go. This guy's the Scarecrow, right? This is the Scarecrow. Obviously, right? It's Dave, right?
Yeah.
That's what it seems like.
Well, here's the problem is, at this point, if you're, ideally a comic book, you can tell what's kind of going on just looking at it. Well, this is where it gets a little confusing, right? I mean, all these guys were there and all of a sudden they're gone. And then, like you said, okay, this guy gets up. Okay, who is it? And then we cut to this new scene, and now they're kind of like in their lair with the girl tied up on the wall, right, with the painting.
Or she's on like a slab.
Yeah, like a slab, yeah. And they're talking about this cult thing that they have.
Yeah, they're trying to. I guess the painting, their demon guy Kolomai was underneath the Scarecrow painting, so they're removing the Scarecrow paint to reveal Kolomai underneath, and I guess that's their demon lord who will now come back to Earth or something. Right,
and then as they're sitting there, we see like a shard of glass fall from the ceiling, and then the guy says, "Hey, that shard of glass, who?" And then we see the Scarecrow smashing through the window like Batman almost, descending upon them and laughing as he does it, right? It's great.
Yeah, clearly it's like, this is Dave, right, Miles? Did you think this was Dave coming through the roof here?
Dave? It's just... I'm a little offended that you would think anyone who would come down through a roof at a critical moment in a comic book would be called Dave.
but clearly this is the brother. Dan. This is the brother Dave coming through, obviously, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, keep that in mind. All right. So here we go.
So Scarecrow comes down and he's punching people left and right. He's punching these goat men.
Yeah, good fight scene here.
Yep, really good. And then the head of the goat men, Gregor Rovic.
He was the guy at the auction who lost the painting.
Right, skinny guy, yep. So he is now running away from this house carrying what's her name again, the girl?
Harmony.
But all of a sudden, the Scarecrow is there. And he's threatening to kill Harmony unless the Scarecrow, kind of lets him go. And then all of a sudden, he's like, stay back, or I swear the woman dies. Let me by or I'll slay her and her blood will be in your hands. But then he's like, huh? We see this branch from behind him. He turns around. No, the trees, they're alive. So the trees are now attacking this guy. Scarecrow, help me. But the Scarecrow doesn't help him. So then I love this narration. 3 days from now, the police will find the body of Gregor Rovic. Every bone will be broken. Not one muscle will be untorn. Not one organ unruptured. The police, of course, will of course be baffled. They will classify the death as unexplained. A shame they will not know enough to classify it under the proper heading, retribution. And we see this guy's body all like twisted and mangled up in like the branches of this tree, and the Scarecrow's walking away in the background like towards the moon, and it's freaking awesome.
It's pretty great.
Holy crap, this is great.
Because look at that dude's legs, Miles. That is not how legs should bend. He is
no, probably not. Probably not.
I need a lot of Bengay and ace bandages to get over that one. But all right, so then we cut back to the brothers. Now we see Jess and Dave. They're over top of Harmony. She's on a stone slab somewhere, and they're saying, "Hey, are you all right there, Harmony?" And she's waking up. Then what happens?
Yeah, and then she's like, "They're gone." But let's not talk about that. Only, Jess, I feel so sorry for you. Your poor paintings, they're destroyed. Your painting. He's like, my painting? You must have been dreaming, Harmony. No one's damaged the painting. There's nothing wrong with it at all. Nothing. I wouldn't be too sure that, Jess. I don't think he was smiling before. And we cut to the painting of the Scarecrow, but now he's smiling.
Yeah.
And at the bottom it says, Jess Duncan's only response is silence. A terribly, terribly long silence.
Yeah, that's the end.
Yeah.
That's the end. All right, so Miles Watson, explain what we just read. Because
explain it.
Well, here's the thing. Dave is not the Scarecrow, right? Even though they set it up to make it seem like Dave's the Scarecrow, he is not the Scarecrow. And I guess his second appearance of this character in that whatever book that was, Marvel Spotlight or whatever, whenever Dave disappears, the Scarecrow appears. So again, they're leading you to believe Dave's the Scarecrow. But Dave, it turns out that the Scarecrow lives in that painting. And he's like a demon. He's like a being from another dimension. And he fought this Kolamai, this demon guy, centuries ago. And he ripped the horn out of his head. And he put the horn in the painting with him or something. And that sealed off the portal to Earth so that that demon couldn't come into Earth. And this cult wants to get that painting back and to open up the portal so their demon lord can come into Earth. But Scarecrow is trying to protect the Earth from that demon. And so that is not really what's here, though, in this story. Like, this story makes it look like Dave is the Scarecrow. Because if demon is in if the Scarecrow is a little demon in that painting, why did he come through the ceiling of that place where they had the girl tied up? Why didn't he just hop out of the painting? You know what I mean? He hopped out of, came through the skylight.
That's more than I could divine from this. I thought it was a red herring, like, oh, they're trying to make it look like it's Jess or the boyfriend, and it's obviously the other guy. And I thought, well, it's a little too obvious. Maybe there's another explanation, but I didn't have a clue about that.
Yes. Like, I don't know if anyone reading this will ever understand that he supposedly comes out of the painting. Like, Michael, did you think that?
No,
not at all.
Yeah.
Not in a million years would I have gotten that.
Yes, that's why I was very confused. But other than that, though, it was fun. Yeah.
No, the writing is really good, but the storytelling is not great. And I don't know if that's the artist's fault or the writer's fault, but it's a little bit confusing for sure.
Well, it's got to be the writer in terms of how he plotted, because that scene where they show the guy Dave getting up off the ground and walking out of the room, that clearly implies he's the Scarecrow.
Right,
that he's going back to save Harmony.
Yeah.
And then, so, I mean, even if you just read it with that, so it almost makes me think that later on they went back and retconned stuff. But then how do you explain the painting of smiling in the painting?
That was my, if I can jump in, that is my interpretation of this, is that maybe they were setting this up as the lesser brother is actually the Scarecrow, and the stud rich guy with the hot girlfriend, and they're going to set it up as a triangle where he's kind of protecting her because he loves her, but he's also, he's the loyal brother, but he's got a crush on her, and he's kind of weak, but in his alter ego, he's the Scarecrow. That's very comic tropey, where you have the guy with the disability go, be this mighty dude, whether it's Spider-Man or Thor, or it's a very common trope, as I'm sure you're familiar with, I don't want to call it a red herring, but you understand what I'm saying. You have the weaker character turns out to be the hero. That's what I thought was happening. That's where I thought they were going. Yeah, that's absolutely where I thought they were going with this, and maybe that was a little too obvious, but I have to say I agree with Michael in that this was a real page turner. I was genuinely interested from the very first page. I saw if you ever saw the movie Dragnet?
Yes.
With Tom
Virgin
Hanks
Connie Swells.
We just want to dance in our goatskin pants. That's what this reminded me of. I saw these guys with their ram hats on and their robes, and I thought, holy shit, it's Dragnet again. Yeah. But from the brutality of that stupid security guard telling them that he's going to shoot them with his gun not drawn, good move there. But the brutality of it, the Scarecrow interrupting, killing them, and then the auction and all this crazy stuff going down. It's a very fast moving story. It's a good story that's not what I meant to say. It's a very entertaining comic. It's well written, it's well drawn, and I don't mean to jump ahead at the end, but I was very impressed with this in a lot of ways, but I also think there's some deficiencies here that we can discuss. Right. I think that it's way too linear. There's no ball hit into left field for the Scarecrow to deal with. That was a big problem that I had. He's slaughtering the cultists. I'm a big believer in that you're only as dangerous as your villain. Mm-hmm. And in this story, they make the Scarecrow too powerful, and Gregor Rovic is set up as the head of this cult, and it's like, come on, dude, you got to bring something more. At the end, there has to be something coming here to throw a curveball at the Scarecrow, like, hey, somebody sets him on fire, and that's his weakness. I don't know. But
by the way, Miles, that is his weakness. Fire.
And that's very logical. He is a Scarecrow. And if I may jump on one more point of Scarecrow vulnerability, again referencing Friday the 13th, the series with the Scarecrow, or no, a different episode where a Scarecrow comes alive. It's actually a very different episode. They can't defeat it with like a shotgun, a knife, or anything. At the end, they manage to do enough damage to it, and it goes out, and it gets caught in the wind. And all the stuffing comes out of it. It's a really cool sequence where the Scarecrow gets blown inside out and obviously becomes harmless. But I wanted to see one big challenge here. It's just a massacre. He massacres this cult. There is no challenge.
Yeah, that's a fair point. So here, the writer here is Scott Edelman. Micah, are you familiar with him at all?
I've definitely heard his name, but I can't remember what else he's done.
I never really heard of him. He was born in 1955. He wrote 26 issues of various Marvel comics, including Captain Marvel issues 50 to 55.
I read those.
Captain America 220 and 221. And he did single issues of Logan's Run, The Defenders, Master of Kung Fu, Avengers, and Omega the Unknown. He did
really?
Omega the Unknown. Yeah, we still haven't done Omega the Unknown on here.
Oh, it's in the queue. Don't worry. Don't you worry.
He also, for DC, he wrote a couple issues of Welcome Back, Kotter. How about that? The Welcome Back, Kotter comic. That's pretty good.
Hilarious.
He also wrote several books and short fiction. They were mostly sci-fi and speculative fiction. And he edited various science fiction magazines, including Sci-Fi Magazine, the official magazine of the Sci-Fi Channel. He also edited a wrestling magazine called Rampage, and he wrote unauthorized biographies of Stone Cold Steve Austin in China. So look at that.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
That's Scott Edelman. But yeah, I think if it was set up as, if this story was set up as Dave is the Scarecrow and like he's possessed by some demon or something from an altered dimension, and maybe that's what he was intending, and this was just setting the stage for it, then it would work a lot better than like the Scarecrow coming out of the painting. I don't think that really made sense.
Well, I like the idea of it. It's a great idea. It just wasn't done right, right?
It wasn't conveyed clearly. Let's put it that way.
Right.
But otherwise, except for the characters calling each other by their first names all the time, I thought that writing was fine.
Yes, definitely.
Miles, just from a nuts and bolts thing, how about the writing? It was professional and solid, right?
I like the writing. I think this was well written. I don't think it was overwritten with all that. After last week, and again, I'm referencing our previous episode, but that was a very exposition heavy storyline with a tremendous amount of exposition. And I think this is almost underwritten in the sense of who the fuck is the Scarecrow? Like, where is he coming from? And I actually think that's a stronger way to start. I think they could have given us a little more as far as the Scarecrow, being who is this dude? Where is this coming from? He's killing he kills bad guys. We don't really get more than that out of this episode. He rescues the girl and kills a shit ton of bad guys without any remorse and with every evidence of a great deal of pleasure. He kills a bunch of bad guys, but he gets a big chuckles out of killing the bad guys, which is very Punisher-esque. And there's even some word choices here about how their lives are wasted, and he's just ending wasted lives that are also very Punisher-esque. There was a line in the Punishers in the 90s about how he's like, they choose their lives just the way I choose to end them, kind of thing about people making choices. They're making these choices, and I'm making a choice to kill these bastards. So I got that very heavy vengeance vibe off of it, which is fine. But exposition-wise, there's almost nothing here, which, if given the choice between too much exposition and not enough, I'll take not enough. I like the way it was written overall. I think the dialogue and everything was pretty snappy. There's not like a lot of painful exposition where you're just like, oh, God, please make it stop.
I thought it was...
I think it was,
I thought it was pretty good. Pretty good. All right, the artist here is Rika Rival, and he's a Filipino artist born in 1939. Yeah, he did 35 issues for various DC horror titles during the 1970s, including The Unexpected, House of Mystery, Ghosts, and The Witching Hour. Then he did 16 issues for Marvel, including Man-Thing issue 15, Planet of the Apes 11 through 16 and 22, and then Doc Savage Volume 2 number 3. I love me some Doc Savage.
Oh, so one of the ones the series we read?
No, this was Volume 2, Issue 3.
Okay.
We did Volume 1, Issue 4, I believe. But Rika Rival. I got to say, I love the art here, Michael. I think. Oh,
it's great.
It was a nice cross, but it's very Marvel-esque. The action scenes are very Buscema or Kirby, like the punching, everything looked great. But the detail. And his faces, it almost sometimes, especially when he was drawing that evil guy who lost the auction, sometimes his faces reminded me of the caricatures in Mad Magazine or Cracked.
Yes, 100%, yeah.
But it worked, and it was really well. I really like the art here. I think this is the best art we've encountered since the last time we gave out our awards, in the 100. I think this is the best we've seen in the most recent episodes of this show.
Yeah, the only way, I love the classic coloring, but it could be improved by slightly better coloring in some spots.
Agreed.
But other than that...
Artwork's great. Color could use a pop for sure. I found some of the pages to be washed out, and I know that this is a scan, so maybe coming off the presses when this actually happened in the 70s, but having I have a very large collection of comics from this era. This is when I was learning to read comics. As you guys know, my comic book reading came from my brother's collection, which started in the late 60s. So this is the artwork that I kind of grew up with, this style of and these colors. I'm thinking some of these colors could definitely use improvement, but that's my only criticism of the artwork. I feel like this artwork is good. I feel like it's horrifying. There's use of the moon, use of Mike Dell's heavy blacks, shadow, light. I think it's good. I think it's really good artwork. There's a panel or two, like when like when poor what's his face is being killed, the Colt Learovic. That almost goes into caricature of terror, like his face.
Yeah.
It's pitiful rather than scary. I mean, he's just it's poor guy at this point. It's like you're fighting way over your weight class here, dude. You know, you don't know how to. You're up against this guy who can manipulate matter, who can't be shot.
He can also control the crows. He had his crow buddies fly in with him.
Got the crows coming in. It's a little much for my taste. I don't approve of that. But the artwork, I think, is excellent. I think it's excellent, especially for Shock-Tober, for Halloween artwork, like him carrying the body against the moon, the gold moon, with the style of the inks that he uses for the sky are very reminiscent of Bob Pepper from Dark Tower, the game, which I'm enamored of, his artwork style. He did a lot of covers of books in the 70s, a lot of very distinctive covers, and he used a style of staining with like watercolors that's very distinct. And if you look at the texture of the sunset there, this actually looks like art. I mean, you can see a texture and a pattern of the ink on the paper. That's not something you see in comic books very often, if ever.
Yeah, it's good stuff. Even like the final panel, just the way they're looking up at the portrait of the Scarecrow, and just the way it's tilted, the angle of it, and it's all good stuff from Rika Rival. Michael, does the name Rika Rival? Does that?
No, I actually created a post commenting how I've never heard of this guy. Like, if I did come across him, it was by accident, but I've definitely never heard of him, and I can't believe how good he is. However, I did find out that in this time, Marvel and DC were employing a lot of artists from like the Philippines and from like Puerto Rico. And basically, to be honest, it was partly cheap labor, but partly these guys were just incredible draftsmen, like as you could see here, right? But yeah, none of them are really big names. Not many, but there's a lot of these guys apparently.
Yeah.
This art's great. And like I gotta say, like the art was not 10 out of 10 all the way through. Some of the panels were not great.
Yeah.
But if you go to page 10, the scene where the guy elbows the other guy, if you look at the body language on those figures, it's excellent. Like you said, it's slightly exaggerated like Mad Magazine, but the layouts of the figures and the way the camera moves around them is just great. It's just incredible.
Yeah, there's always a sense of movement to the figures.
Right.
And can I point out on page 11 of the digital version anyway, when Gregor Rovic is yelling threats at the van?
Yes. Yeah. Love that.
It's a solid yellow panel, solid yellow, with the truck in green and a little exhaust smoke, cartoony exhaust smoke. There's a lamppost in the foreground, and he's kind of gaunt and holding up his stick. I love that use of the yellow. That's very Star Trek-y. They had that thing of, we don't have the budget on the original Star Trek, didn't have the budget to do backgrounds, so they had blank gray, which they then painted with light. They used incredible amounts of these very lavish purples, blues. If you go back and watch the original Star Trek, they'll be in their cabin and the wall is like a lurid pink or a hard purple or a very, very deep red. That's called painting with light, and that's what you do when you want to use light rather than a physical set to, create a backdrop or a mood. And I just feel like that was a really cool touch. Like, he just did the solid yellow panel. There's no reason for that. Like, from a standpoint of realism, that makes absolutely no sense. But it's just fucking cool.
Yeah.
It's art for art's sake. It's art for art's sake, which I'm all about. I like the way he goes with these backgrounds. He's got this in the upper left corner on page 11. He's got a smudged purple, blue, kind of gritty background. And then in the next panel, it's like a kind of blue gray. And then in the next panel, it's kind of a lilac. And then he's got the solid yellow. For considering I criticized his colors, I really like the colors here. The bottom right panel is orange.
Yeah, like during
this is
the fight
painting
scenes
with light.
During the fight scenes with the cult, a lot of the backgrounds are red. Because they're fighting.
And they change color. Yeah, it's yellow, it's red, it's yellow, it's red. He has a solid black background. This is painting with light, I think, at a very high level. I think this artwork is subtle, and then if you go to at the end when one of the guys rises off the floor and they're trying to be all ambiguous about it and imply the Scarecrow is, the heavy blacks come into play again. Real heavy blacks. Like you can almost hear the artist hitting the canvas with his stick, making these blacks come down, and then the blue floor. I really think that the coloring and the background coloring on this is almost a character in itself.
Yeah, you guys were sour on the coloring earlier, but yeah, that's Glynis Wine. Is that Len Wine's wife?
It's winning me over. It's winning me over. I was just a little disappointed with the fact there weren't more vivid colors, but I think now looking at these panels as we're talking, I'm like, that's not what he's trying to accomplish here. Like at the bottom, when they're about to sacrifice the blonde with the exaggerated cups.
Yeah.
She's got that 50s style bra that's like a bombshell bra.
Yeah.
Gravity defying bra that she's wearing, but at the bottom of 15, when they're about to sacrifice her, he's about to plunge this weird looking crooked it doesn't even look like a dagger, it looks more like it's made out of wood, but at any rate, he's about to kill her with a sacrificial blade. The background is this beautiful green that's got that same watercolor kind of paper texture of stained paper texture in the background, and there's a halo about him, which is this green color. I'm really very impressed with this artwork. I'm very impressed with it.
Well, the colorist here is Glynis Wine, and she is the ex-wife of Len Wine, or first wife, or whatever you want to say.
Right.
So yeah, she's the one doing all the coloring here. And but Rika Rival, apparently there's no inker credited, so I'm guessing he did the inks for this. So
and I just want to say, adding to what I said earlier, obviously the color choices are great. I just think it's limited by the poor printing process, where some of the color shades get muddy, right? Because whereas today you have Photoshop has like 20 million colors, but this probably had 4, and they had to mix them together. So some of the secondary colors look kind of muddy. I think that's the only issue with the coloring. But Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, but yeah, I like it reminds me. Oh shoot, Michael, who was the lady? Beware the Claws of the Cat. Who was the colorist there? Remember?
Oh, Dave Cockrum's wife, or
no? But I was like enamored with the colorist there. It was a real famous lady.
Marie
Severin? I don't know.
I don't know if she. Yeah, I think so. Actually, she may have been the colorist there as well, because she drew it, and I think she also colored. But because she did a lot of that stuff using color in the backgrounds to like convey emotion or feeling or whatever, and I think a lot of that is being done here as well.
Yeah, it was Marie Severin. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, and I'd also want to point out, you want to talk about this storytelling. Going back to the same page we were talking about, page 11, you can tell exactly what's going on by just looking at the art. You don't have to read the bubbles. You can pick up on nuances with the dialogue, but the skinny guy walking towards the crowd, cutting to a 2 shot of him yelling at them, then a slightly wider shot, then that great shot of the van going away and him kind of gesturing with his hand. And then you notice in the next scene, again, the camera is on one side, then it moves to a close up, then we cut to underneath shot looking up at like this
skylight.
The skylight, and then another reverse angle. Like, it's just great, Like, even if you didn't like the story, you could just read it for the artwork. It's amazing.
Yeah, I have a feeling this will be a nominee next time we give out awards.
Oh, interesting. All right.
Take a note. But, all right, so any final thoughts, Miles, on the Scarecrow before we give the ratings?
Well, before we do the ratings, I guess it is only fair to talk about what I didn't like about the story, which is that I did feel that it's too straightforward. There's not enough drama. The only drama is that the girl gets kidnapped. The Scarecrow prevents the theft of the painting. Then he returns and slaughters the entire cult and kills the cult leader without a battle. He just hunts him down and kills him. Yeah. The fact that the cult leader begs for the Scarecrow to help him as he's being killed is pathetic. It's not. It's scary in the sense that it obviously shows that the Scarecrow doesn't give a fuck. Like he He's ruthless. He's going to kill people, but it's pitiful. It's not scary in the sense that you're dealing with a character here who's too powerful. These cultists are not powerful enough. I didn't like that.
But
I didn't like that.
Address that for a moment. Maybe it's because I never read a lot of horror comics, but maybe that's this isn't technically a superhero comic where you want your hero to overcome obstacles, where it's a horror comic where just some demon monster just destroys everything. You know what I mean? Like maybe that's the distinction.
Good point. It's a good point. It's not something I'm particularly crazy about because I always feel like even in those, you usually have a scene where the good guy's murdered and then comes back to like the old EC comics, which were incredibly bloody and gory and everything else. But usually you had the hero done some horrible wrong and then he came back and kicked somebody's ass really hard. Mm-hmm. In this, there's drama is conflict. Let me put it this way. Drama is conflict. As a storyteller, the drama is only as strong as the conflict. If your hero is Vin Diesel and his ego is bigger than, the steroids he's taking, it's a problem from a storytelling standpoint. I needed a little more conflict. Mm-hmm. There's no, he's just stomping. It's like a guy stomping grapes. The grapes aren't really fighting back. Yeah. So I had a problem with that. Big problem with that, actually, in the story. It takes away from the fact that, they're saying, like, if we just get one drop of blood, our master, our god or whatever it is, will rise. And I was like, okay, cool. He slaughtered the cult, but now the god's going to show up. And that didn't happen, which might happen in future episodes or whatever. But that is a big beef I have with this. I didn't want to come down on this story as unvarnished praise because I was sort of annoyed by that. Mm-hmm. Having said that, that's my thought in the negative direction. I still enjoyed reading this a great deal, and it was a really breezy read. Like I banged through it in just a couple minutes because I was kind of turning pages. That's why I missed some of the subtleties of the artwork.
So 1 out of 10, Miles. What do you think?
I'm going to give this an 8 or an 8.5. I'm not quite sure where I'm coming down on that, but in terms of readability, I'm giving it an 8.5. In terms of the overall, I'm going to give it an 8, no higher than an 8, just because I feel like the story could have been better. It's just too straightforward, and the fact that they made the cult leader this scrawny guy with a cane who then gets killed, I'm not okay with that. They needed a villain who was more loathsome and less pitiful. He's not intimidating. So I got to penalize for that. So, but I enjoyed it. And I think for Shock-Tober's purposes, I think this is a very, this is a much more appropriate story for Shock-Tober than the guy in his green underwear.
Yeah, Mike.
From last week.
I think the picture of that guy tangled up in the tree is the most Shock-Tober panel we've ever encountered.
That is fucking brutal. Yeah, that's brutal.
I will also give it an 8 out of 10 because the art is just spectacular, and the cover by Gil Kane is magnificent. And my problems with the story are just the confusion of the Scarecrow comes out of the painting. What? And things are real easy for the Scarecrow. There's no real drama or anything, but I still enjoyed it. And for the art alone, 8 out of 10. So, Michael, what do you think?
Okay, this could be a first, folks. 8 out of 10 for me as well. Yeah,
all around.
The art, like you said, is just incredible. It's so creative. It's so skillful. The writing is not up to the level of the art, but it's still, even though the plot is a little confusing and a little bit weak, I did enjoy actually reading it. The narration was great. And I think overall I liked it because it creates a mood, right? Like very appropriate as a horror comic and for Shock-Tober especially.
That's right.
So, yeah,
Shock-Tober.
That's right.
There it is. How about that? 8's all around. Dead of Night issue 11 featuring the Scarecrow. Now, when you read this, though, I think you can see potential here for this character, right?
Particularly, yes. Oh, yes. Great character.
If you have the brother be the Scarecrow and he's somehow possessed by the demon spirit of the or whatever from the painting, I think it would work better than an actual demon hopping out of the painting. But
right.
Whatever. You could definitely see that you could do something with this, but that never happened. So, all right. All right, Michael. Well, next week, what do you pick for us there?
Well,
it's our last week of Shock-Tober.
That's right. And this week we had 3 8s. I think next week we might have at least 2 10s. I don't know how we missed this character 2 Shock-Tobers in a row, but we're not going to miss him again. We're going to do Giant Size Kid Colt, number 3.
What?
Featuring Knight Rider, who is also known as the original Ghost Rider.
Yeah.
Okay.
A cowboy on a horse, Mike?
Sounds like a Shock-Tober.
Shock-Tober?
Yes.
What?
I dug deep for this one.
Miles Watson, how do you feel about this? A Shock-Tober book about a cowboy on a horse. What are we doing here?
Okay.
Awesome.
We have to address the fact that Mike L is Canadian. He's confused about certain things. There are certain things he's just not going to get. He thought that a white dude wearing a hood and green underwear and that was horror. He was confused about that, and that's because our brothers to the north have a different standard than we.
Miles
They drink
Watson.
different beer. They watch
Miles
different
Watson,
sports.
you
They're
understand.
confusing me with their differences.
You understand, Shock-Tober was a Mike L. He conceived the concept. It's his idea to do Shock-Tober.
Frankenstein conceived the monster. Frankenstein conceived the monster. Look, we have to get to the heart of this here. We have to go to the rotten core of this problem. The problem is that Mike L created something and it escaped from his control.
Clearly. Mike L, you sure you don't want to take another swing at this? You sure you don't want to pick something else?
Hey, I seriously considered it, but I can't pass up an appearance by the original Ghost Rider for Shock-Tober. I just can't.
But is it really? All right.
Don't worry, Mike Dell.
I would like to make a suggestion
What's that?
For a horror comic
Okay.
to be reviewed, if not during Shock-Tober, then at some future time.
All right.
Sure.
This is a comic which I have on hand.
Oh, okay.
It is The Unknown Soldier 261. I am holding it as I speak. It is a straight-up, gory, kill-a-thon horror story. It has a demon. There's tons of killing. It's really violent. People drown in blood.
What is
it? Is
like,
a straight-up horror story.
Is this DC or Unknown Soldier? I never heard of this.
The Unknown Soldier is DC. It ran for several hundred issues. You should, when you get a chance, you should familiarize yourself with it. It's a very violent cartoon about a guy who gets his face blown off and becomes a master of disguise for the Allies during World War II. It's really violent. There's a lot of killing. Some of the storylines are a little more complicated than you might expect from a comic book. But The Unknown Soldier has this adventure and I remember reading this when I was in elementary school, but I have the original that I bought in my hand. 60 cents.
What issue did you say? 261? 261.
It is 261. And I'm holding it in its little plastic container to prevent it from destruction. And I remember discussing it with my classmates because we were like, holy shit, this was a bloodbath and it's really violent and there's like a demon and all kinds of horrible things happen in it. So it's worthy of at least looking at for a horror discussion because it comes at a right angle to the normal tropes of like monster fight, full moon, etc. and so on. It's very unusual horror story. It's set in World War II in France, and it's not even normal for The Unknown Soldier. The Unknown Soldier was a very World War II type comic. There were spies and bombs and gun battles and shooting. But this is completely different.
All right, Miles Watson. Well, here's what we'll do. We'll let you. You've done 2 in a row. You need to rest, and you don't want to be part of this kid cult nonsense. So we'll give you a break. But your next time you're on, we'll do Unknown Soldier 261.
Very well. I accept these terms. I accept them.
Because it'll be like an extension of Shock-Tober. It'll be like a.
I am a living extension of Shock-Tober.
Yes. But Mike L, did you ever hear of Unknown Soldier?
Oh, is the Pope Argentinian? Of course.
I have no idea.
Fine. But also, I got to point out something here. We're shattering records left and right. You just made your 9th appearance, Miles Watson.
Right.
We didn't even mention it.
Right.
If you come out again, it'll be your 10th. What are we going to do?
That's right. And I didn't mention it specifically because I thought if I did, in the middle of the broadcast, you'd be like, well, fuck that. This clown This guy, we only brought him in as a warm body. He's a placeholder, and now somehow, like Stalin, he crept into power without anyone noticing.
Well, here's what
But now it's too late. Now
that he's got 9, we got to give him a break. We got to get because we got to use that to leverage Jank to come back on, so he can tie him.
That's right.
And then
You
we
have
leverage
to
that.
think about how you're going to do that.
Yeah, we always got to keep you two coming on, so we always have guests. But yeah, so Jank, we have to wait for Jank to tie it up, and then we'll put you back in front. And then
Jank's not going to be happy when you tell him that I've usurped, I've moved in subtly with my Stalin-like techniques.
Yeah, I told him you were doing 2 in a row. He was very upset. So,
That's right. You should expect some kind of bomb. You should, in fact, expect a visit from the Scarecrow.
yeah, Shock-Tober. All right, Miles
It'll
Watson.
be Jank. Jank will come in through, like the Kool-Aid man, he'll come through your wall butt dressed as a Scarecrow. And with that, I will speak no more.
All right, Miles Watson. Well, thank you, buddy. And
Yeah,
9 appearances. And go to Amazon and buy his books, Cage Life, Knuckle Down, Sinner's Cross, The Devils You Know, a horror anthology of short stories. You can go get that. And 19books.com as well, you can find them. So thank you, Miles Watson.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. Number 9. All right, so that wraps up this week's episode of Flea Market Fantasy. You can listen to every episode on the Comic Book Syndicate channel on Stitcher, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. You can also follow us on Twitter, on Facebook, on YouTube, and the Comic Book Syndicate website. Every week we pick a different Bronze Age comic. 1 week I pick, 1 week Mike Dell picks. So until next Tuesday, disperse!